The campaign against common sense presents Russian elephants are the only true elephants. A war is being waged across the world today. A tireless campaign against common sense. Individuals, groups, and whole countries are waging this war. Our country is leading a coalition of forces defying common sense, and for many years we have been winning on every front. To keep hold of the ground we have captured, we will tell you more about the many front lines and battles in our struggle, from ancient times right up to the present day. Previously, we told you stories about nature, youth, and education. And now we want to set the record straight on science. Today, few people doubt that Russia has always been number one in every way since history began, and this can never change. Our people are the most spiritual. Our language is the richest. Our technology is the most advanced. Even Russian ballet is the best on the planet. Our forefathers were always the best, a fact that is a source of great pride, spurring us on to new victories. Just think about our victorious achievements and great construction projects. Just remember how we exceeded every production target, completing 5-year plans in 3 years. And what about our boundless fields that yielded the richest harvests? From beneath these fields, we extracted more iron ore than anyone else in the world. We even reshaped nature to benefit our people, making rivers flow backwards. We do not wait for nature's handouts. We take from it whatever we need. Why? Because we can, as the best country on earth, the kindest, the most spiritual, and the most humane. If anyone disagrees, may they feel the wrath of our missiles, the most lethal weapons in the world. Yet our cantankerous opponents continue their criticism and constant grumbling, trying to poison our celebrations. As all right-minded people march forward together into a bright future, one small group, the fifth column, is rocking the boat. But we are not scared of you. We are happy to engage in an open debate. Call us. If you disagree with us, give us your opinion.
Those are just empty words, fiction and propaganda. In fact, few people were ever heroic. Most had very hard lives, and many lived on the brink of starvation. There was no freedom of speech at all, and very few lived happy lives.
Well, there were some temporary difficulties, unavoidable sacrifices on the path to universal happiness. But the objective was clear.
Вперед к победе коммунизма!
Heaven on earth for workers and peasants, and we almost managed to build it. And we knew what we were doing. Our goals were well grounded in science. History has shown that our country has contributed more to world science than any other. Meanwhile, our so-called friends in the West have claimed all the scientific achievements as their own. But our scientists, academics, and self-taught inventors stand behind all the world's greatest inventions. But we were modest back then. We missed a trick. Later, happily, we started to make up for this shortcoming when we realized it was our duty to correct this injustice. In 1946, the party published a decree on the priority of Russian science that inspired our great people to uncover evidence proving our superiority from ancient times and right up until the present. Historians and researchers, even the lay public, unearthed and restored to glory the names of pioneering Russians, whose contributions to science and technology had been unfairly forgotten. Now, there can be no doubt that all the major discoveries in science were made first and foremost by Russians. One of the first thefts of Russian intellectual property took place in 1769. Across the world, it is thought that the father of car manufacturing was the Frenchman Nicolas Cugnot, because his forerunner of the automobile came 17 years earlier than the self-propelled carriage designed by Russian inventor Leontay Shemshurenkov. The only difference between the two inventions was the force that drives each vehicle. Shamshurienkov used pedals like a catamaran, while Cugnot had a small steam engine. The irony of it all is that the steam engine was also something we invented. Here too, our fame was stolen away. Or we can take the steam locomotive. Everyone says it was invented by an Englishman, Stephenson. But we know for a fact that it was our Russian inventors, the self-taught father and son team of the Cherepanovs, who were the first to invent steam trains. What about the electric light bulb? Do you think it was Edison who invented it? Of course not. Everyone thinks of incandescent light bulbs as Edison's creation, but the true creator was a Russian scientist, Alexander Ladygin, member of the Russian Technical Society. Incidentally, the voltaic arc that you may think was invented by Alessandro Volta should actually be called Petrov's arc. This is how we restored the names of our scientists to world science. And in school we were all taught that every invention, every discovery belongs to us, and that we could be rightfully proud of our homeland. It is even said that there was a case when a teacher asked her pupils, "Where do elephants live?" And she gave the highest grade to the child who wrote, "Russian elephants are the only true elephants." Perhaps this is a slight exaggeration, but if so, it is the fruit of a noble excess of patriotism. We applaud both the child and the teacher, who was right to reward patriotism with the highest grade. Of course, our Western neighbours became even more desperate to claim that our inventions were theirs, forcing us to fight back. Why do you think they gave the Nobel Prize to Marconi? Do you really think he invented the radio? Actually, it turned out later that our man Popov beat him to it. We even celebrate Radio Day each year on the birthday of our Russian inventor, Alexander Popov. The same is even true of airplanes. In America, people still believe that the Wright brothers were the first to fly a plane. How can they really believe that, when it was Możajski, the great Russian designer, who was the first?
Yes, but the plane that Możajski built couldn't fly. It couldn't even leave the ground. It crashed the first time the pilot tried to take off.
But that does not matter. Only the idea is important. At the beginning of the 20th century, our science was famous around the world. Pavlov, Mechnikov, what great names! This truly was a golden age for Russian science. But then civil war broke out, and our scientists were driven abroad, deserting their homeland in our time of need.
When the choice was between dying of hunger, being shot, or leaving the country, naturally many people chose life. All around the world, Russians were invited to work at universities and big companies. Everyone knew that Russia boasted a wealth of talent. Ford, for example, employed a number of Russian experts and engineers. The tragedy was that they could not expect the same working conditions back home. The first television was created by Zworykin. The first ever helicopter was built by Sikorsky. The inventions and research of Mechnikov the biologist, all of this could have been ours. Don't we need helicopters too?
Yes, we needed them too. But the people you named all left Russia when life got difficult. They were not patriots. But Russia still has many smart, talented, and most importantly, patriotic scientists.
Who knows? Perhaps many of those who stayed behind also wanted to escape to a country where their talents would be fairly rewarded. But the doors were slammed shut. After that, it was a matter of luck. Some people found a way to adapt, others did not.
It has nothing to do with luck. The country's leadership wanted science to service a noble cause, to generously feed the people, to make them happy and joyful. Western scientists gave us some of their dubious theories and achievements, and some of our academics made use of those theories. But science must not be derailed by Western provocations. Science must serve the people. we do give credit to the West where credit is due. The contribution made by Newton, for example, cannot be denied, even if his first name was Isaac. But the same cannot be said of Albert, the one with the very telling surname Einstein. After all, what is this relativity that he dreamed up? Can it be that a meter measures 90 centimeters but can also measure 120 depending on which way you look at it? This is just nonsense. A group of academics led by Arkady Klementievich Timiryazev, the son of the great biologist, tirelessly fought against the bourgeois theory of relativity. You need to speak the language of the people, gentlemen. What do you say to that?
Well, after Arkady Timiryazev so mercilessly ridiculed the theory of relativity, it actually turned out to be very useful when building the atomic bomb.
Well, perhaps it was useful, but it is still questionable. Has anybody actually seen this thing, relativity? The same is true of genetics. It was no coincidence that people called that science the harlot of imperialism. Then there was this Morgan person, and another with the rather suspicious surname of Weizmann, who bamboozled huge numbers of people with this idea that children look like their parents because of so-called genes. But has anyone actually seen these genes? By the way, no one has yet been able to produce a photograph of any genes, don't forget that. But it was the peasant and brilliant academic Trofim Denisovich Lysenko who single-handedly routed the Morgan-Weizmann camp, who launched their pseudoscience like a weapon to attack the materialistic foundations of Darwin's theory. Back then, some academics were driven out. Many were stripped of their academic titles. Some were held in prison for a little while to maintain order.
Your Lysenko, hero of labour, celebrated academic, 2-time laureate of the Stalin Prize, 8-time laureate of the Order of Lenin, was the one who founded the Genetics Institute, and yet he vehemently denied the existence of genes. He put all his energy into developing cutting-edge Michurin genetics that incidentally had absolutely nothing to do with Michurin.
But even as an academic, Lysenko spoke in simple language so that the man in the street could understand it.
For example, he claimed that in his laboratory, wheat sometimes turned into rye.
But what have chromosomes or DNA or genes got to do with anything? This is imperialist wool pulled over our eyes. In Soviet biology, groundbreaking discoveries are explained not by mathematics, but by Marxist-Leninist philosophy. When we were making our major breakthroughs in chemistry, biology, and physics, most of our academics were studying and teaching Marxist-Leninist theory and the history of the Communist Party. But even this is not so important. After all, what do the people need? They need to be protected and fed. Stalin understood this perfectly. He even made a profoundly wise comment, saying, "If there is a harvest, there will be bread. If there is no harvest, there will be no bread." How perceptive, how wise. You could say he opened the eyes of the people. And harvest there was. Just think back to the film, Kubansky Kazaki. All those melons, watermelons, and all the other fruit and vegetables, they were all real.
Yes, indeed, the vegetables were real, but before the shoot they were soaked in kerosene to stop the starving film extras from stealing food after each take.
What choice was there? The people were ignorant, uneducated. They did not understand that the country was bringing in record harvests, that everyone would have enough to eat, more than enough.
There certainly could have been enough food if Vavilov, the great geneticist, had not been shut away in prison. His work could have resolved the food problem forever. Instead, he was starved to death in his prison cell.
That was because the party had explained what was correct in science and what was not. But Vavilov could not understand it. But Stalin did appoint his brother to be president of the Academy of Sciences. Stalin really had a first-class mind. Nowadays, people would call him an effective manager. He inspired people to great feats just using punishments. It was true even in his closest circle. Look at the system he created. He could sit at a Politburo session alongside Molotov, whose wife at that moment was languishing in a distant prison camp, and next to Kaganovich, whose own brother had been executed by a firing squad just days before. Then there was Kalinin, a father figure for the entire Soviet Union, practically the president of the USSR, and he also sat alongside Stalin. But his beloved wife was at that time in a camp washing prisoners' clothes for the good of the motherland. Do you understand? Even under such pressure, people were still loyal to their leader and loved him like a father, because the state was more important than any personal problems.
Well, maybe. Stalin sent his peers to be imprisoned or shot for political reasons or out of personal antagonism, or maybe to increase their loyalty to him, to make them fear him. But why treat scientists like that?
You could never understand. All we hear these days is Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley! But we had a whole archipelago of concentrated talent. More a prison than an incubator, but still, the results speak for themselves. There were also underground laboratories and even whole science cities where scientists and engineers could forget they were prisoners and happily continue their work for the good of the motherland. They were even given extra food rations. Look at Tupolev, for example, who was imprisoned on charges of subversion. If he had not served those years in prison, would he still have become one of the world's greatest aircraft designers? That is the question. The same is true for Korolyov, who conquered outer space while his name was listed for execution by shooting. Would we have become space pioneers without that death sentence hanging over the father of Soviet space exploration? This is why they all became great scientists. People think more clearly in extreme situations. Stalin invented this great system for producing Russian talent, and it never failed. The great leader was an outstanding academic in his own right. He personally contributed to world science. It was not for nothing that his scientific paper, Marxism and Linguistic Issues, quickly became a source of famous quotations. This was the apex of philosophical thought. He was so great that the entire country lost itself in joyful studies of that volume. Science and the people truly became one.
People such as Lysenko and especially Stalin can hardly be considered true academics. In Russian science, you could say there are two traditions. On the one hand, there were overblown priorities built on empty words. On the other, there were true scientists whose raw talent led to great breakthroughs despite all the impediments. Many of them were recognized by the world's scientific community. This included Nobel Prize winners Landau, Alferov, Kapitsa, Ginzburg, Abrikosov, Novoselov, Game. But there could have been many more if they had been given the opportunity to work and teach in their home country. Naturally, as soon as the door opened again, many talented people began to leave Russia. They were not seeking material wealth, they simply wanted to realize their potential.
Shame on those who scampered away. This time you cannot say they were chased off by hunger or firing squads. They emigrated, created all kinds of inventions over there, stealing Russia's prestige. They deprived us of our rightful fame.
Thousands of talented people are continuing to leave Russia today, and they are running away from people like you, those who wage war on common sense. And amongst those leaving the country, there are scientists, highly qualified experts, skilled businessmen, and simply people of great talent, perhaps even true geniuses. From Tokyo to London, our Russian academics remain in great demand. They're making discoveries, conducting research, creating new technologies. Today, according to the statistics, around 700,000 academics have left Russia and are working abroad. It was recently calculated that Russian émigrés contribute to Western economies the equivalent of the entire Russian GDP, trillions of dollars. Thanks to former citizens of Russia, the West can produce cars, airplanes, medicine, equipment, computers, and much more.
Well, let them produce their computers. They don't amount to much.
американская продукция.
Ну, правильно,
Ой,
вот так ее.
дайте мне что-нибудь, дайте мне что-нибудь. Вот. Дайте. Ой,
We are producing something far more important: impressions. We inspire, energize, and help people look to the future with faith and hope to become examples for the rest of humanity. We created the Tsar cannon, the biggest in the world, and then the Tsar bomb, the mother of all bombs, and the Tsar missile, the Tsar torpedo, the Tsar airplane, the Tsar helicopter, the Tsar mortar. So you can stop spewing your bunkum. Let the rats jump ship. Good riddance. We have a whole army of patriotic scientists with the grand titles of Doctor of Science, Academic, Candidate of Science, even in our parliament, amongst our elected deputies, in all our government bodies, in every arm of our public agencies and authorities. The mudslingers can scream all they want about plagiarism in their dissertations. So what? That just shows how much people love science and want to participate. We still have more academics than anyone else. Don't forget, we believe in our dream, and we will fight for it, and we will win. We will build a new world full of celebration and optimism, and we will do just fine without any of your common sense.